Hi, I'm Councillor Waseem Zaffar, Birmingham City Council's Cabinet Member for Transport and Environment, and I'm also the Chair of the Route to Zero Climate Change Task Force that Birmingham has set up. Can I start by saying thank you to Footsteps and thank you to you all for participating on this very important Earth Day Online gathering, which will discuss Birmingham's aims and objectives around tackling the very important agenda around climate change. Last year, political parties across Birmingham came together to declare a climate emergency. We did so because it was the right decision, but the role played by many of you, including Footsteps, in lobbying us and encouraging us to take that position was second to none. So thank you for the lobbying you've done, and thank you for the continuous challenge that you bring to us, key decision makers within Birmingham City Council. Declaring this climate emergency was a start. We then went on as a council cabinet to make tackling climate change one of our key political priorities as a council, and then set up this task force which has representation from education, representation from business, representation from right across the city and right across the political spectrum, and importantly has representation via Footsteps on the faith communities within our city. The role that faith institutions and people of faith in Birmingham play and are playing in tackling climate change is very, very important. We've got to make some big decisions, but winning the hearts and minds of our communities is going to be paramount to continue this battle against climate change and to achieve the target of being carbon neutral by 2030, which is what we declared when we declared the climate emergency. We set that very brave and bold target. So I'm really looking forward to the information that comes out of this gathering. The evidence that you discuss and you debate today will be fed into the Climate Change Task Force, and our next virtual meeting looks forward to hearing from representatives of Footsteps on some of the discussions you've had. And in conclusion, again, I just want to say a big thank you. We're living in unprecedented times. Coronavirus is creating challenges, and I hope each and every one of you and your families and your communities and your congregations are safe and well. And I pray that moving forward together, we will be in a safer place, in a safer environment, in a safer world, where tackling climate change will be right at the heart of decision making and the way of life moving forward. Thank you again.
Welcome you to this half of Footsteps, Faith for a Low Carbon Future. You may have heard that Earth Day has been celebrated now in many countries throughout the world for about 50 years. And we decided that it was a good opportunity here in Birmingham to raise awareness about climate action, since that's the theme that Earth Day has taken this year. Footsteps has been working since 2015 in the Birmingham area, bringing all the faiths together to raise awareness about the dangers of climate change and to take action to combat it. So today we're able to offer a 2-hour program online that we hope will be inspiring and enjoyable and will spur us all on to greater efforts to combat climate change. You're very welcome. And I'd now like to introduce Rabbi Margaret Jacobi, who's going to say a few words on behalf of both her own Progressive Synagogue and the Birmingham Faith Leaders Group that she belongs to.
Earth Day is a day of climate action, but it struck me that what we have at the moment is climate inaction, and that's exactly what we need. No one would have wished it to come about this way. We're living in truly challenging times, and our hearts go out to all those who are suffering in so many ways. First and foremost, those who've died and their grieving relatives, but also those who are exhausted in their work to treat victims of the virus or keep society going, and those whose livelihoods have been lost, those who face isolation without the help they need, and so many people suffering in so many different ways. And especially we think of the vulnerable, those on temporary contracts, single parents, homeless people, people who already were struggling and have been so much more affected and with so little backup. This situation has forced inaction, and this has led to the discovery or rediscovery by Jews and non-Jews of the Sabbath, which is deeply embedded in the Hebrew Bible and in Judaism. The Pope has commended the idea, and I've read 2 Christian chaplains writing about it in recent weeks. There are 2 sorts of inaction. One is simply to do nothing. That has been forced on many of us. We don't know what to do with the time, but feel we should be doing something, like tidying the house or learning a new language. That's if we're privileged. The second is to pause for contemplation and reflection, to think about our lives and our relationships, and if we have a religious belief, to think about our relationship to the divine. Even in these times where many of us are at home all the time with enforced rest, the concept of the Sabbath as a special day for contemplation and reflection continues to have special meaning, or perhaps has even more meaning. A Sabbath for the earth is what we need at the moment. The Torah talks about a sabbatical year, a year when there should be no planting or harvesting, when the earth's produce is free to grow without interference from us. We've been forced to rest in these few weeks. As a result, we have also given the earth a rest, stopped flying, used our cars very little, consumed less, realizing that everything is not always available. In those rare moments of being able to go outside, we've learnt again to treasure nature, birdsong, emerging blossom and greening leaf and wildlife re-emerging. Now the din of traffic is quietened. In the statement about the coronavirus pandemic, Birmingham Faith Leaders Group said that the current crisis had forced us to realise our interdependence as human beings. It said, we particularly value the fact that common themes are emerging from the different faith traditions. We are being directed towards a recognition of our interdependence and our responsibility towards the vulnerable in society. On Earth Day, we recognise our interdependence, not only with each other, but with everything on Earth. At this time of pandemic, we are especially aware that we cannot control everything on Earth. Nature has a way of working that is unpredictable and can be dangerous. What we do has consequences that we cannot know. The paradox is that as human beings, we also have unprecedented power over the earth, power which we have used destructively to bring us to the point of a climate emergency. On Earth Day, let us remind ourselves of our interdependence with the earth and relearn our relationship with it. And let us too remember our independence with other human beings to ensure that everybody is included, to ensure that we make a just transition to zero carbon society where everybody is included. And if we do so, and if we overcome the threat of coronavirus, which we will, we can overcome too the threat of the climate emergency if we have the will. As the Faith Leaders Statement concludes, above all, we call on all people during these difficult times to live as people of hope, that the threat, and we can read for that both coronavirus and the climate emergency that we all face, can be overcome, and that we will emerge stronger, more resilient and wiser from the experience.
I actually want to make, we've got 3 minutes on my little clock. I want to make time for the last question because I think it's a really interesting one. And anyone who can and who would like to answer, please do. Chris Martin from the Quakers, as I said, how do the speakers hope that we will emerge stronger, more resilient and wiser from the COVID-19 pandemic? Which is a lovely question to conclude with. And Amrit, you in a sense were just talking about exactly that, the reflective time. So I don't know who would like to pick up that invitation on emerging stronger, resilient and wiser. So anybody? Yes, Justin signalling first. Go on.
So I suppose my hope is that we come out of this with a much better attitude towards the most vulnerable in society. The reaction we've seen from the public towards the homeless, towards people in our sex work industry, for example, raising their voices as allies, I think is inspirational. And I also hope there'll be a greater compassion towards our public sector staff. More people are understanding how hard councils, the NHS, the police work to keep us all safe. And I hope that that's a lasting legacy for the future.
Yeah.
So, and for me, it's about people just taking time to appreciate the really important things in life, really, which is around fellowship and being with family and taking time out, but also, you know, the amount of people that have volunteered to help their neighbours and other people in our communities has been absolutely astounding. And I hope there's a lasting legacy of people seeing volunteering as something that they will do that transcends beyond this crisis.
Just one thing that, if I may, as this is a discussion and a conference, a webinar on faith, it's very clear that people of faith don't give up. What we're seeing is people of faith raising their game and stepping up to the plate, because we live in hope. We believe that we will not be abandoned. And as Nick said earlier, the one message that needs to go out loud and clear is there is always somebody there. Please don't anybody feel as though they are, just because we're isolating doesn't mean we're isolated. We've got to reach out to each other. We've got to be there for each other.
Lovely, very good. I'm just going to abuse the chairman's prerogative to offer 3 tiny reflections myself as well. First of all, you've all said things about family and friends. It's true. I've spoken to my family members more in the last 2 weeks than in the previous, I'll say 2 months, nothing more than that. But that's made me personally stop and think about that. Secondly, as some of you have said, everyone says we want to go back to normal. You know, life will get back to normal. But there's an opportunity to think, was normal quite what we wanted it to be? And I think it's very important we hang on to that thought. But lastly, in a sort of spirit of optimism, I'm sure like many of you, I watched the pictures of China building a hospital from scratch in 10 days with some incredulity at the beginning of the year. We're actually about to do exactly that at the NEC. And if we pull it off, that will be an incredible reflection on the capability and the teamwork of people across this region. People doing the jobs that perhaps are not called out as the heroes and heroines all the time, but that will be a thing that we can be very, very proud about. So just 1 or 2 reflections from me. But thank you very much, Chris, for asking that thoughtful question. We are out of time, so I'm just going to say Bahadur Singh has put the last word in saying, can we have a regular update? And I'm sure we'll just take a little